I'm going to review a little bit of 101, the thinking errors, of course. It's, you know, so it's not too repetitive because I go in deeper into this one. But if you haven't watched that one, you can go back and watch that. But there's going to be a little bit of these slides that are repetitive just for review. So, of course, we go over the benefit every time. You've seen this. If you know about our company that serves your company, your employment, 24/7 crisis line, and we have free counseling, family, couples, you know, child therapy, individual, for anyone that's in your family, in your household. So we're going to define thinking errors again, and defense mechanisms. We're going to definitely define those. Why we don't self-talk. We're going to talk about ants. That's, you know, what that looks like. We're going to talk about chemicals, why they hijack us. And chemicals are actually emotions. So why we need to ask ourselves, why are we burying our feelings, right? In our belief system. And then we're going to get to the root of how to reduce stress, sickness, anxiety, thinking errors. So how do we reduce that? That's the whole point, right? We're not going to ever get rid of thinking errors. We don't need to rid ourselves of these things because some of these things are helpful. And then how we allow time and practice. And that's the whole thing about thinking errors part 2, that we can talk about time and practice a little bit. I taught these classes hundreds of times in another modality of court-ordered thinking error classes. And so for, 6+ years, I taught this class. It was a 3-hour class or 4-hour class. So there's a lot to it, you know. So what are we going to focus on? Like what do you focus on in your life? Your balance, your values, your negativity, your thinking errors? What do we focus on? And there's this space that I love, this quote. Viktor Frankl. I have all of the all the books always referenced in the back of the PowerPoints, by the way. If you haven't watched one of these before, they're always in the back. So they're always referenced to books and articles and research. And so this is, you know, his favorite little book of Viktor Frankl, of his inspiration and his life. There's stimulus in a space, and I love the word space. And so there is our power to choose our response in that space, and in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So thinking errors are just about growth, our soul. How do we go into our soul and say, you know what do I need to feed my soul right now with a new growth mindset? That's a book, mindset. What do I need to do to stop focusing on the negative as much as I used to? What do I need to do to stop jumping to conclusions? Those are all thinking errors. So there's some space there, and you just need to, but before we do that, we have to clear space. So I have lots of ways to do that with interventions with clients, and learning how we need to respond to that space and how do we clear it. I mean, I clear my weeds so my garden can grow. I clear a drawer so I can be organized. I clear my desk. I just, I clean my car. They're my favorite reward systems. It's a reward system for me to clean my car. So I have space for breathing and for time and for other things to come in. That's what I take from that quote. So these are the definitions. They're just here. So and in Thinking Errors 1, part 1, I went over these extensively. They're there. So just watch that. I'm not going to go over each one of them like I did in the other one, because that was like about a half hour worth of definitions. But these are just, they're very simple. This is my own simplified list. I do shoulds and shames, by the way, on 8, because a should is I should do this, I should exercise, I should eat a donut, I should, that's just shame. And that is what, and we'll talk about in the root issue today. I don't go into much of the other ones because this one's a very deep rooted issue of shame, personalization, jumping to conclusions. Those are all things that we do. I have tons of stories about jumping to conclusions. I have funny stories I love, but you can just watch the first one for how we mental and emotional filter and how we jump to conclusions. We as society, as Americans, when I quote, we focus on the negative, and we are very good at jumping to conclusions, those two. In statistics, like if people are given this kind of information and then given it negatively in this kind of, way, man, we focus on the negative. So the next part that we all have to understand, and this is in multiple workshops that I do because I just love this. This is my favorite thing. This is the little CBT. So it's thoughts, feelings, and behavior, and I'll refer to that. And our frontal lobes is here. And once we go to a behavior, we either are going to be here in the frontal lobes or we're going to be in the fight, flight, or freeze. So everything is, our response system is going to go to a behavior every single time, hundreds of times a day sometimes, right? We have a thought that comes in, we self-talk, we have a physical response sometimes, and that sends a feeling to us. It sends it to our gut, and we say, okay, oh, I've got to call that person. Oh, I forgot to do that. All the time, constantly, millions. And then we have a behavior. Oh, I've got to write that down. Oh, I've got to call that person. Oh, I've got to put a sticky note. Oh, or I actually have a behavior of a fight or flight, of a fear response brain, because a thought came in. So just know that that's the frontal lobes, and that's where we do all this fun stuff that's really actually the healthy part. Logic and emotion together is wise mind. If we filter out logic, it's a thinking error. If we filter out emotion, it's a thinking error. So we need to use both together. And that's the two parts of the frontal lobes that I'm going to go over right here. So right side, left side, this is repetitive too. Just so you know where this is. Creative is right side. When our creative brain lights up, our depressive brain will not light up. So it's really our emotional needs, our raw emotions. We can't have shame and empathy at the same time. We can't have depressive mood, like real sad feelings, when we're being creative most of the time. We just don't have. We like to, create a creative activity so it floods out the depressive side. So that's all emotions. And, in the right side, it's like, oh, there's, sad mood, happy mood. But the creative is really, really important, and we forget that. And I think, if you think back, somebody got creative during COVID. And I know that because every craft was sold out in every store. Every puzzle was sold out in every store. If you went and tried to find a puzzle, which I did, I tried to send some puzzles to my kiddo in California, and I couldn't get one for 6 months. So what does that tell me? Creative. Someone was sitting home and being creative. We planted, we worked outside more. We went to the outdoors more. That's a creative imagination. And we went to the right side of our brain to help us cope. So super important. Left side is our language and our linear, and our, we look outside to the world, and we take in, right, advice and logic. And so we want to use both sides of this frontal lobe. So thinking errors. So the only thing you need to know about thinking errors is they're not facts, really. So you just have to know that. Thinking errors are not facts. Now, is your emotional factual? Yes, your emotions are facts. They're just there. It's how you feel. But your behavior from that emotion is what we're going to talk about too. But the reason why we need to self-talk, so why I talk about self-talk, is the only way that we self-talk is up here. And we're going to talk about why we don't self-talk: fight, flight, or freeze, burnout, impairment, mental disorders, but later on a little bit more. But what if we don't self-talk? What do we know are facts and false thinking? or what are true. So you have to ask yourself, is this true? How does this make me feel? And what if I didn't hold this belief, this big story that I have for myself? You know, it's super important to have these on the frontal lobes all the time. I could tell lots of stories on how to get there, but you just need to know, is this true? If someone gives you a should, you should have known better. Well, okay, I should have known better, but I could have done something different is what we change it to. And I could have known better, but I didn't. And I made that decision and that's past. And so I'm going to learn from that. That's what you tell someone that shoulds you. And then how does this make me feel? Well, that makes me feel like this. And then if I had a belief that you should have known better with everything and you are worthless because you should have known better, then that belief system is already installed in your roots, and that's the problem. So we have to undo those chemicals and negative beliefs about ourselves and negative cognitions. So why don't we self-talk? These 4 reasons. If we're in the midbrain, we are in survival brain and we don't self-talk. For a quick example, if I had a piled up, 4 cars in front of me on the freeway, which this happened once, I was on my way to teach a DBT group and when I was an intern, and there's 4 cars piled up in front of me and I was the 5th car and I hit enough room. I was lucky that I could slam on my brakes and not be the 5th car that hit the car in front of me, right? So did I self-talk? Did I say, oh my gosh, should I swerve? Maybe I should take my foot off the gas. Maybe I should just not do anything. I should fight, flight, or freeze. Well, I did slam on my brakes and I didn't hit the car because I slammed on my brakes hard. And it freaked me out a little bit and I started shaking. I have physiological response immediately because I immediately went to survival brain. So survival brain is essential to keep us alive. We didn't pet the saber-tooth tigers. We slammed on our brakes when we needed to, and many, many, many other things when we felt in danger. But fight, flight, or freeze does not work with relationships, does not work day to day. It burns us out because it's exhausting not being in the present. So yes, fight or flight. Oh, I was in the present. I was like, no, it took me to a past autopilot behavior that says you have to slam on your brakes or you will be smashed and die, right? And that's all. The brain doesn't need to explain itself. It doesn't need to say, oh, do this in a minute, or nope, it keeps us alive. So it's awesome. But in the long run, you need to get out of it. Burnout, there's workshops on that. Impairment, it blocks your frontal lobes 4 to 6 hours after use of something. And that's impairment of all kinds of, substances, alcohol, any benzo, any antipsychotic, and any stimulant. So, and I taught tons of substance abuse classes those years too with this class. So I've done tons of classes on impairment and substance abuse. And so mental disorder, real quick, it's in the first one, but what happens is you're in the back of the brain with PTSD, with autism, with ADHD, with OCD, with generalized anxiety disorder. So if it's a true full-blown disorder, we sit back there. So that's where we need help to bring us back to here. You don't reason, you don't organize your thoughts, you don't have a reward system, you won't solve a problem when you're in a fight, flight, or freeze mental disorder. So with that, we'll go to this. So this is why midbrain, fight, flight, or freeze. So you're either going to be aggressive, passive aggressive, or you're going to be passive. So of course we want direct and assertive, respectful behavior. And that gets us out of the fight, flight, or freeze. Like I said, they don't work in relationships because you're either going to be disrespectful, you're going to say yes when you mean no, and then you're going to have regret and resentment. That's what those two send you. And then you're going to be very passive, peacemakers, passive, stonewallers, stuffers. They're all the same thing. People tell me all the time that they're peacemakers, and I'm like, okay, call it what it is. You're being passive. Peacemakers are, I don't like conflict. No, the peacemakers can actually deal with conflict and be the mediator. So it depends on what you're calling a peacemaker. So that's not being assertive is a mediator. So I need and I feel and I'm willing to do. That's how you get out of these fight, flight, or freezes with your behavior with relationships. So that's more on that. Okay, so what's going on in the brain? So we have to know what's going on in the brain. And you think, well, this is about thinking errors. Well, thinking error stories lead us to behavior that really changes us and our belief systems about our survival response. The only example that is all of this is trauma. So any kind of trauma. So a prior car accident will tell me to slam on my brakes. Or if I've been rear-ended before, so I'm always afraid of someone hitting into me, right? So the car behind me, I was like, oh my gosh, if I slam on my brakes hard, that car behind me is going to hit me, right? So prior traumas, a dog bit me when I was 5, so now I don't like dogs. That's not me, but for an example, or any prior survival that your brain stored as a chemical comes out in thinking errors and defense mechanisms. So we do have to go back before we can go forward. If this is impairing our lives in a flooding situation, we're constantly flooding. We're constantly in fear brain, intense fear. We're in chemicals that hijack our body, which is cortisol. It's a chemical, and it's a hormone, hormones and chemicals that hijack us. And so it's like, okay, those chemicals are sent to our brain and says, oh, hijack, be burned out, or wake up in the middle of the night with cortisol. We don't sleep, folks. Utah. Okay. It's like, in Utah, we have great circadian rhythm because we have great seasons and the sun, but everywhere, we have to be on our own rhythm. And there is a whole sleep hygiene workshop on that. But when we're not sleeping and we're ruminating and we're having flashbacks and we're flooding and we're burned out, which is all this because of trauma, that's when we need some therapy. And we need to go into those. So there's 2 chemicals that we react to. We're either going to react out of fear or we're going to react out of love. So fear-based is where we usually stay nowadays. Like statistically, we stay in fear a lot. And the last year, we don't even know what's really going to come from that in the fear brain. But it's either I'm going to act out of love or I'm going to act out of fear. Okay. So in Heather Forbes' book, by the way, and I don't even have that referenced. It's one of my favorites called Beyond Consequences. So when you're talking about parenting, there's always 2 behaviors that are stemmed from either fear or love. And so every time a kid has a behavior, it's going to be out of fear or love. And that's it. And she said, there's two emotions that we all respond to. So think about that. And how often are you in fear response? Not just fight, flight, or freeze, but just fear response. So this is a little chart about the correlation of the chemicals with emotions. So you think, oh, wait a minute, chemicals are not emotions. Well, I'm here to tell you they are. They are. And so this is a little chart of what happens with shame, with fear, with contempt. Contempt is one of the 4 horsemen of Gottman that says, oh, it's passive aggressive, it's rolling the eyes, it's a little like, I can't believe you said that. And that just kills relationships, the 4 horsemen do. Enjoyment, high. So serotonin, right? Your happy hormone that's made in the gut. You got to get it from the gut to the brain. Dopamine, that's our motivation. Okay. So teenagers it's not even teenagers, it's adolescents from 10 to 26 is my range. Dan Siegel stops it at 24, but your brain doesn't stop developing until 26. So dopamine is super high during that time. Think about it. What makes us want to drive fast and do risky behavior? And our dopamine is 3 times higher during that time to prune our brain and to actually make us progress. So, but it comes with high risk behavior. So look, so high in the enjoyment and interest and excitement. Serotonin, high, low in the joy or the I can't say it now. I can't look at the word. I can't say it. But so anger and rage. So as soon as you get into anger and rage, fear, okay, terror, serotonin drops. It disappears. Because remember, it hijacks. So depressive, fear, all those strong emotions of sadness and rage, which is anger, is a root of depression. It hijacks the serotonin and it just doesn't flow. And there's lots of other things I could talk about serotonin in the gut forever. And if you're not healthy with your inflammation, your lymphatic system and your gut's not healthy, you're not getting serotonin from your gut to your brain. So SSRIs help that. Yes, but I have lots of other, if you watch the sleep hygiene one, there's lots of supplements that actually produce and help transmit your serotonin. It's amino acids actually submit serotonin and help your flow. So that's a whole other subject. So chemicals, the neurotransmitters, that's where I was getting to. So neurotransmitters, so GABA, 5-HTP, L-tyrosine, those are some of the natural amino acids that are neurotransmitters that you can take to help calm the nervous system and get the serotonin to where it needs to go, actually, and melatonin. So your chemicals send you a message in your nervous system and sends an impulse, right, to the body and the brain. So they're runners that run the race to every organ and cell through emotional chemicals for our desires, memories, intuitions, and dreams, which gives us a mind and body response. Now I can talk about the soul. It's not the mind and the body. The soul is what we usually need to feed. And that's how deep I go is with clients is like, what's the soul needing, right? So, for example, fear will activate our fight or flight, right? Fear of smashing into a car and produce me to shake. So I was shaking. So actually I did, a physiological response that I had no control over. You have no control over your thoughts and feelings and your physiological response system. You only have control of how to get out of it later, right? So after time and you practice breathing and you practice getting back to the present, you practice room scanning, car scanning, as I did in the car. So you have to come back to the present because you thought you were going to die. So you just reacted. So crying, it literally serves to relieve the stress that it causes, a continual chemical emission that eventually leads to illness if we don't let it out, right? But then emotions help us survive. So they're super good. We just have to embrace them. We have to embrace it and learn how to face it and manage it. So defense mechanisms, on to that. So what happens when we get defensive and have an automatic body response, like me shaking because I slammed on my brakes? So our fear response is an automatic built-in system designed to protect us. So 85% of men and women interviewed for shame research could recall a school incident being shamed from their childhood. So back to shame. So so if I have an automatic response system every time I'm shamed because it went back to a childhood bully, do you see how this is? It's not about the event. I can slam on my brakes, I can get bit by a dog. It doesn't matter. It's about the emotion behind it that we store. So it's like, wait, we're talking about thinking errors. Well, thinking errors send us to this physiological and this feeling. So we have to first like go, okay, here's the thought. That was in the thinking errors class, part 1. Here's this thought. Here's these thinking errors that I'm sending myself over and over and over again. And that's sending me a physiological response. So I can't self-talk. I go into fight or flight. And then that makes me feel powerless. And then I just punch the wall. That's my behavior. And then I'm going to be punching walls. Over 50% of participants experience shame in their faith history, found resilient healing through spirituality. So they found how they healed that was through spirituality. Rising Strong is that book from Brene Brown that's referenced there. Rising Strong RS. Okay, so we're going to talk about defense mechanisms here. So this is the key. If you have not heard of defense mechanisms, like thinking errors, most people have no idea what thinking errors are. A lot of people don't understand defense mechanisms. So here's thinking errors, the 10 basic thinking errors. What happens is we go into defense mechanisms because our brain has wired that together. So when someone tells me I'm a liar and they're the ones that are liars, that's actually gaslighting, but then I'm going to shift the focus, right? So that was a shift focus. So if someone tells me I'm a liar, but I know that they're the ones lying, like, oh. So you learn how to be passive aggressive and shift the focus. Somebody, internal. So they turn people's minds and attention onto something else, or say, oh, because I lied to you, I'm going to tell you that you're a bad mom. So a kid that you caught lying, right? And they're going to shift the focus. That's a defense mechanism of not trying to get in trouble. Okay. Denial, blaming others, right? Same kind of thing. The projection, comparing, and displacement. Displacement is one of the biggest things. Displacement is the boss yelled at me, so I went home and kicked the dog. And we did that quite a bit because statistically everything went up in domestic violence, in abuse, in the last year, in substance abuse, lots of things. And so I wondered, and I had lots of people wanting me to do that kind of workshop. So I did one on bullying, and it was just on displacement, because displacement is bullying. Okay. So we have a situation and we put it on somebody else, or we bully them, or we project on them. Projecting is on a whole group of people. So then you project on your whole team at work or something like that, or a whole group of people. Did we not get into that quite a bit this last year? Did a lot of projection. We did a lot of comparing ourselves to others. Because when we get into fear brain, these are what happens. This is what happens. So we shift the focus on somebody else. We go into denial. So just narcissistic traits, that's all it is, traits, entitlement, grandiose, one-uppers, call it just one-uppers. You might have some people in your world, in your family, in your work, somewhere that does some of these things. Justification, I talk a lot about. I'm skipping all over this list. Justification, I talk a lot about with my clients, because what happens when you're used to explaining yourself for your behavior or your boundaries. So you choose to change your mind, a choice. You chose to change your mind, and you decided to justify it by explaining yourself to this other person. And I think you might think, well, there's nothing wrong with that. But what happens is when you have to explain your boundaries or why you changed your mind, it's very dysfunctional. It's like, I have to explain why I'm doing this. I have to explain why I'm doing that. I have to explain the boundary. Like, Mom, I need to hang up the phone with you right now because I just can't, and then you explain yourself over and over and over again. And just instead of just being assertive, I feel like, and I'm willing to call you tomorrow. you know, something like that. I just make up the scenario. It's just a scenario, hypothetically. So, yeah, I mean, why do we explain ourselves? And that gets into a syndrome a little bit. That goes deeper of why we learn how to be very passive when we're explaining ourselves. So we feel guilty. So when guilt comes in, this defense mechanism comes in, justification. And you can look at all these other ones. Dismissal, you ignore and brush off and, you know, put it under the rug. It's not the same as denial. Dismissal is like, we know it's there and we're going to actually passively aggressively put it under the rug and ignore it and disregard it and disregard the person, the individual. These are not helpful, but they keep us alive in some ways from our childhood, that we've learned how to get defense mechanisms going, playing dumb, you know, avoidance. They're all part of trauma of some sort. So we have to undo those. So this is the other part that's automatic, that everyone has. We all have automatic negative thoughts, okay? That sends us into defense mechanisms, that sends us into thinking errors, that sends us into overgeneralization, all these kind of things. So this is all part of this. So they're ants. So automatic negative thoughts. I have to worry about it, or something will happen. If I look nervous, they won't hire me. I'm such an idiot, right? So lots of like negative cognitions, negative thoughts. So negative cognitions are deeper. I am an idiot is a negative cognition, but it starts with a negative thought, right? What's wrong with me? Is a constant battle inside your head if you're coming up with that negative thought. So example, an automatic, I made a mistake at work, so I'm probably going to get fired and I'm no good at my job. So super overgeneralization, discounting the positive, jumping to conclusions. There's should in there. There's almost every single thinking error in that one statement of I'm probably going to get fired. So that's an example of extreme in one sentence. I mean, you can think about you lumped, you overgeneralized, you weren't logic and emotion together. You're a black and white thinker. That's thinking error number one. I am probably just going to get fired. If it said I will always get fired when I mess up, then that's definitely a thinking error. Always and never is that first thinking error. Or the new thought process or the story is I messed up, mistakes happen. I'm going to work. I'm going to get through this. I've gotten through this before, something like that, right? So sometimes it's helpful to write down your automatic negative thoughts through the day and look at it as a new. So here's one. So that's why this little chart, that's exactly what you do, is here's the automatic negative thought, and here's the new thought process. So I have my little ant up there because I couldn't find an ant. So I have a little bug up there. So pretend he's an ant. And then I found an owl because those are my favorite, I have owls everywhere. Little bit of my spirit animal. And so he's like going to eat the ants, right? That's how I am as a visual. So if you can visualize an owl coming down, just pecking, and of course I couldn't find an anteater, that would have been even better. But here's an owl, here's a bird, right? That pecks at the ants and eats the ants. And there's a million of them though, right? So ants are like millions sometimes, right? And you're like, oh my gosh. I have little baby ones that come out in my yard and I'm like, just spray them. And I'm like, just go away. So it's like, and they just keep coming, right? So we have to manage those, or they're going to multiply big time. So think of that, visualize those ants and go, okay, do I need to spray them? I hate spraying, I have to spray them. Or am I going to wash them out? Are they going to come back? Or am I going to get a bird to come back and eat them so they don't reproduce and get out of control, right? That's the whole point. We're going to have them, but they may get out of control. And I talk about, this is, automatic negative thoughts, ANTS, is from the anxiety program that I teach. And so we go into lots of those kind of things. If it serves us, right? It serves us to have automatic negative thoughts because it gives us lots of anxiety. And we're used to lots of anxiety. We like cortisol coming through our body all the time. So we're inflamed. I don't, but it's what we're used to. So how to identify ANTS? You know, these are more than just thinking errors, right? They're negative belief systems too. So what ifs, for example, if the thought is, what if I lose my job? It would be better to phrase that I will lose my job. Okay. Be specific about the fear. You know, if you're late to work and you don't show up, you may lose your job. If the thought is, I feel like something bad is going to happen, right? Which is a lot of the anxiety stuff that comes up. Make a list. What are you worrying about? Write down the first ANTS that come into your head. You might use the thought cascade, the thought cascade. That's so cascade is basically overgeneralization. So the cascade, the snowball effect, it goes into these big overgeneralizations. So just do those and an approach to learn more about what is scaring you. What's scary for you? Notice the thoughts that seem to come up often and are more impairing. So I call that hijacking, right? So what's hijacking the other thoughts? What's impairing your life? If they're 9s, 10s, and 11s, you know, out of 10, that means they're really high disturbances. So we have to go, okay, what what is hijacking me? What is telling me this story when I know the facts are this story? The facts are this. But man, I still want to hold on to these scary things. Because I'm going to give you one thing here. It's not in a PowerPoint. The reason why that happens is the brain has to have clarity, connection, and control. So first we have to have clarity. So we try to get clear, right? And sometimes we're so hijacked and impaired, we're burned out, we're tired, we can't think straight, we can't think up here in our frontal lobes. So we never get to clarity. That's logic, you know, right? So clarity is so essential. So 90% of any of this, any feeling, any fear, any emotion, any disorder, any automatic negative thoughts is labeling it. So we're clear. So that's why we write them down. So we can look at them and go, okay, that makes sense. That's clear now. This is what I'm doing. Then I connect the dots and connection, human connection, just connection. And then we have power over it. If we never get to power, if we don't have clarity. So this is why I like education. It's just clarity. Let's get clear on what's really going on. Not why. We have no idea why. I don't do why, I don't do why, and I don't do why. I do what's going on. What's label it. What are you feeling? What's going on? Well, I have lots of changes in my life. I've had to work from home and juggle the kids and be a home, you know, I mean, I had to home teach, blah, 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 right? There's so many changes. That's what's going on. So, okay, let's put that down. And then why are we blowing it up into bigger portions? Well, because we don't have connection. And then we don't have power. So we got to find those three. Those are the 3 C's of the brain. I did, I've had that in a couple of my last PowerPoints. But yeah. So we'll move on to this so we can get to questions. So chat anything if you have anything or comments. So negative cognition. So I've responded to that a couple times. So this is the first time I put all these in here. This is what I do with EMDR and negative cognitions. So negative cognitions are what you really believe about self, not what you feel. So I feel overwhelmed. Okay, I am overwhelmed. Do you see the difference? I I don't deserve love. I am worthless. I feel worthless. I feel worthless and like a failure some of the times, but it's when I have a negative cognition to self. Okay. So these are negative ones turned positive. So when you are living in a negative cognition, I'm ugly, body permanent, I'm permanently damaged, I'm broken. Oh, I have a little soapbox about that word. I have a soapbox about several things, but I am broken. If I feel broken, I just don't like the word. Okay, but you know, is anyone really broken? It's that's pretty depressing to me, but I don't believe in it. So I deserve only bad things. I deserve to get fired, right? So I just keep on getting fired from my job. So I just deserve bad things that happen to me. I deserve to be miserable. I am different. I don't belong. So if you have that negative cognition, that's a real tough one. I don't belong. You can look up Brene Brown's book, Braving the Wilderness. I don't have that reference either, but Braving the Wilderness is about belonging. I have to be perfect. So I do a lot of work with people that have perfectionism issues. Now, perfectionism comes with a lot of thinking errors, a lot of defense mechanisms, and a lot of negative cognitions. That one right there is the shame one that is so deep. Instead, the positive cognition of that is I'm fine the way I am, and I can make mistakes and I'm okay. The reasonable action ones, the safety ones here, the power control of choice. I am in control. I am now in, or I'm not in control, and I am now in control. So that's back to that. I don't have clarity. I don't have connection, and so I'm not in control. So those are some power struggles that we get into with the negative cognitions that I have no control. You know how many times people have said in COVID time that we have, I just feel out of control. I don't have any control. I feel out of control, or I don't have any control. I am not in control. So that's where we get real deep, because we all have control. We really do. A lot more than we think. So we'll get to the root issues and then we're almost done here. So this is the thing. This is my favorite little tree. I taught this all the time. I actually drew a tree so I could have the tree with it, you know, back there like woodburn. But so here's how you do this. This is something you can draw every day. You can draw it every month to check in with your leafy issues. So you can do it opposite too. Leafy issues that are good, that feed the root. These are the other side. But so failed relationships, financial issues, junk values, addiction, thinking errors, all those things are leafy issues. They come and go, right? They come with the season and they might drop off and you won't ever have that issue again. Or you keep feeding the root the same issue and they keep on falling off and feeding the root, right? Because you haven't dealt with the root issue. So if you have lots of thinking errors that are sending you into defense mechanisms, that's sending you into burnout, that's sending you into depression, that's sending you into anxiety, which they all do, then you've got to look at your root issue. Trauma, I've talked about. Your self-concept means how you think people view you from the outside, different than self-esteem. Abandonment, attachment issues. So development, attachment is 0 to 3 and abandonment happens. And so abandonment's really attachment styles. That's a whole other day, which I am a specialist in. I'm an attachment theorist for sure. And I'm actually have an attachment conference this weekend again, which I can't wait. So maybe I think I'll do an attachment workshop to explain that. Shame is in red because shame is a root issue. I am a flawed person. I don't just feel guilty or I don't just feel like I'm flawed. I am a flawed person. I am worthless. That's shame. Denial, just being in that whole denial. Your mental health, a chronic health issue, those are all in the root issues. The trunk is just these secondary emotions that send us to the root, right? I feel stuck and I feel raw and I feel, rage. Those are your secondary emotions. So you got to know what your emotions are that sends us into self-concept, denial, or loss and grief. So if that makes sense, I have people you just draw the tree and go, okay, here's one issue that I'm going to work on that's feeding the root. And then you look at the root and you do a trauma timeline or a loss and grief timeline and figure out, you know, a little bit about what's going on, that this leafy issue keeps coming back, right? So this little checklist, I have some, you know, I've talked about most of these. Assertiveness versus aggression. You choose, you know, assertive. Leave shame and judgment at the door. You got to have self-talk. You got to do timeouts, humor, thought stopping. Now, thought stopping means after the fact. We don't stop our thoughts from coming in. We replace them after the fact. So when someone says should, oh, you should do this, you should know better, then you stop and go, okay, I'm going to stop that thought, and I'm going to replace it with could, and I'm going to tell that person that, you know, you don't need to be shamed. So the other side here, get in balance, mindfulness, logic, and emotion together. That's the wise mind. We want to get, you know, in thinking errors, like what, 4, 3, and 4, and creating a safe place to do that. Connection, cleaning up your environment, reward systems. I talk about all the time because we really don't like I talked about my reward system. Cleaning up something is a reward system to clear things, right? So create a reward system. You have to clear things so you can bring something in. And so it's like, here's my reward system. You know, I do this, this, and this when I get this and this done. And then my brain says, oh, I want to do that again. That felt good. That's what that is. And then we get to motivation that's clear at the bottom because of a reward system. So there's the references. So any questions or any comments about all this? The second part of thinking errors, most like, you know, why do we have, you know, defense mechanisms? I don't do the whys, remember, but what's going on when we get defensive? You know, why are we so angry? You know, those kind of questions, but. I don't have any chats that's come in yet, so.
I don't have any on mine either. So if you have a question, send it in real quick.
Yeah. So like I said, there's lots of other subjects and the YouTube channel that this is going to go on later, right? So if that's it, let's see, anything else? Any of these, I always like see if I go over any of these books. Like I said, Lost Connections, one of my favorites, Johann Hari, he's right here. Uncovering the Real Cause of Depression, Unexpected Solutions. Yeah, I love it. I've listened to him. Thanks, guys, for your thanks. I don't mind doing these. I love them. So they can go on there. You can watch them later. Gifts of Imperfection and Parenting. Gifts of Imperfection, hands down in my top 5. I actually, you know, eventually, if anybody wants my website, it's paperbackconnections.com. Paperbackconnections.com is my website, and I actually I'm going to have every book that I've ever, you know, ordered and a little brief thing. And I have my top 10 books on there and referenced. And then I'm going to have more stuff on there. My handouts are all going to be on there. So people could just go down there and print. Since I don't see people in person or these webinars, I can just have one place for all the handouts of like your emotional wheel is on there. Your 5 steps of emotional coaching is on there. So any, you know, and I have just started, it's just started. So Paperback Connections is my direct website. So with that,